Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Realize Continuous Savings webinar with Torii. In this session, we'll walk through how to maximize your SaaS ROI by gaining a unified view of your SaaS portfolio and its costs, and leveraging actionable cost savings insights and recommendations to right-size your tech stack. But before we get started, we have a few housekeeping rules. For an optimal connection, we recommend using computer audio in place of your telephone. All microphones are automatically set on mute to limit background noise. And please submit any questions through the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We will address all questions at the end. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, one of Torii's solutions engineers, Steve Desa. Go ahead, Steve.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. So today we're going to be talking about cost savings, how to realize that continuous cost savings with Torii. Now, the goal of Torii is ultimately to help you realize that continuous cost savings year after year. Most companies are spending 2 to 3 times more than what they really need to for SaaS. And, they don't even realize it. By providing complete visibility into your SaaS applications, we're going to help you build an effective SaaS management strategy. Now, SaaS management strategy effectively means, what are all the applications that are being used within your organization? Who's using those applications? Where are all the applications being purchased? Who's purchasing them? And more importantly, what are the applications that are being purchased that are not being used? Where is there any functional overlap between these applications? What about the contracts for these applications? When are they coming up for renewal? And more importantly, what about the licenses? Are we utilizing our licenses effectively? Torii is going to help you discover all these applications. We're going to talk about going into the licenses and ultimately actionable capabilities around the licenses. When it comes down to SaaS management, you're going to integrate your key core applications with Torii. That's going to provide us those data points. We're going to see your licenses. We're going to look at the users that have licenses that are not using those licenses. We're going to look at unassigned licenses. All these data points, and as we start to pull back information from your finance feed, we're going to pull back your contract data. Now this is going to give us a unified view where we can answer procurement's question. Hey, I'm purchasing this app. Are we actually using this application? Right? We're going to get visibility into all the similar or redundant applications that we have and see if we can find areas of wasted spend. We're going to be able to analyze and map all our SaaS costs across different business units. Look at cost allocations in a way that can determine where there are areas that we can help save money. Ultimately, what we're going to do is help eliminate all that siloed and operational bottlenecks. Now, acting on insights, that's the key to SaaS management, right? Being able to reclaim licenses, all these unused licenses that may be assigned to past users. These might be monthly contracts. These might be annual contracts. You might be able to realize some of these savings right away. Some of these savings might come at contract renewal time. We're going to give you insights into some of those underutilized licenses with feature level recommendations. Give you those alerts for every time new software is being acquired. Any time an individual submits an expense report, have those notifications where SaaS software is being purchased, right? Being able to compare apps side by side, understand when all these contracts are coming up for renewal, but more importantly, being able to log into the product, seeing everything in one dashboard where I can visualize where these savings can come from. Part of having an effective SaaS management strategy is to involve all the different teams, all the different stakeholders. These could be IT, finance, procurement. You'll have your various different app owners. This is a team game. making them part of the team will help you accelerate your time to value by providing the application owners that ability so that you can realize some cost savings right away. Now, you're not always scrambling at contract renewal time to figure out, are we using this? Do we have the right data to make the right decisions? As an app owner within Torii, you're going to have visibility. You're going to be able to look into who are the users that are using my applications. What is the usage of these, right? Find areas for cost savings. I'll be able to see that contract renewal. I'll be able to understand what's at play here. Now I can take action. I can remove individuals myself right from within the Torii console, reclaim those licenses, downgrade these licenses, upload my contracts. This strategy of involving more of a distributed ownership model is the key to accelerating your time to value for SaaS. Now, another area of ultimately SaaS management is obviously you're experiencing cost savings, but you want to also be able to share and make people aware of what's happening from a SaaS perspective. Now, one of these features that are coming out is our cost savings tracker. This is something that's coming soon that will allow you to track your savings, understand how many licenses have been reclaimed, right? Understanding what have you saved, where are these license savings coming from? Are they coming from underutilized licenses? Are they coming from active users? Are they coming from past users, right? Being able to visualize this using the cost savings tracker, which is coming soon, will allow you to go to your stakeholders and show them how much you have saved using Torii, right? This is a key element that's coming out within the product. One of the customers that, we have a variety of different case studies on our website, they saved approximately 1.7 million on SaaS spend. Now, a lot of this was done by ultimately reclaiming underutilized licenses. These are unused licenses. Sometimes this can be, a large application like Office 365. In this case, this was Office 365. In other cases, these could be Salesforce or any variety of the SaaS applications, downgrading underutilized licenses. Knowing what your utilization is, help them true down a contract by $1.2 million. This, along with being able to consolidate redundant tech, this was a key element and what has made this customer and many other of our customers successful using Torii for SaaS management. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I am going to jump right into the demo. Now, I mentioned previously, obviously, that the goal of Torii is to achieve continuous cost savings. Although we have about 170 plus integrations, everything starts with effective discovery. Now, this starts with connecting your identity provider, connecting an HRMS solution, right? Using Torii's advanced data engine that will be able to create a map of all the applications that are being connected, pull in these users, and then now what you'll be able to see are all the applications, both sanctioned, both unsanctioned, will give you visibility into your licensing situation. And these are the deep insights that's going to drive those particular cost savings. Now, as we drill into this and we start to look at you've connected applications, we'll be able to see what are the licenses that you have with the individual applications. When we start to look at something like Office 365, we'll be able to see my E3 licenses, my E5 license, any P1s, Teams licenses, etc. We'll be able to understand what are all the licenses that I have, how many of these licenses are inactive, but also how many licenses do I have that are unassigned? Now, most organizations do this intentionally. They do over procure the number of licenses that they have, just to make sure that throughout the year they have enough licenses that can satisfy their normal day-to-day operations. But what happens when the number of unassigned is growing? What happens when the number of unassigned plus the number in inactive is growing? This is definitely a sign that perhaps on that next contract renewal, maybe we don't need as much, or maybe we can leverage Torii workflows to let us know when we're running out of licenses so that we can have a process in place so we don't need to over prepare so many licenses. But as we drill into the individual licenses, we'll be able to see how many of these users have an Office 365. In this case, we're looking at an E3 license, but haven't used their license in the last 60 days. How many of these users might have already left the organization, but still have a license? You know, in Torii, we do have the automation capabilities where we can go in and unassign that license right off the bat. You know, ideally, you want to have this driven by a Torii workflow so that we automatically capture users that have not used the product in the last 60 days, or maybe even multiple intervals, maybe at 30 days. We send out an email just letting them know that, hey, by the way, you know, you haven't used your Office 365 E5 license, right? Maybe at 60 days, we do it again. Maybe at 90 days, we automatically remove that license. This is part of having a cost savings strategy in here that's going to effectively manage the proper use of SaaS. Okay. Now, when we start looking at things like similar or redundant applications, when we start looking at getting deeper into SaaS, what we're going to want to do is be able to look at things such as deeper insights. Now, when we start going through, Tori's also going to show you, areas where you can save money on past users. We can go deeper into the individual licenses, look at your Salesforce underutilized licenses. We might look at things such as your Zoom licenses. And when we drill down on something like Zoom licenses, I could be using the application, but I'm not actually using my license. In this case, I may want to, reduce this user to a basic license, because in actuality, they're not using their license, right? These are the type of recommendations that Torii is going to provide you. Okay. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that discovery is a key element to managing SaaS. You're going to have to understand all the applications that are being used within your organization. By connecting these applications with Torii, we're going to have visibility into all these applications. We're going to have visibility into the usage of this application. If I had a contract renewal that was coming up for Asana, I'd want to know, am I using Asana? With Torii, we're going to be able to connect to the individual applications. We're going to be able to see, what is my usage? Now, when it comes down to usage, we're going to get this data from a lot of different sources. We're going to look at the app itself. We're going to correlate this information, what data came from the IDP. We're going to look at other sources such as Slack, such as Microsoft Teams, and ultimately build out a profile where we can see, yeah, people are using this application. Now, we also have an optional browser extension. The Torii browser extension helps us not only detect shadow IT, but also track the usage of these applications. It's going to help tell us that, yeah, this individual is using the application. It helps augment the data source. When I drill into the individual users, I'll be able to see these are all the users that have come back from our integration with Asana. Now, I can also look at all the users from all the different sources that we have that are pulling in this data. That's going to be visible here on the sources column. You're going to see the little plug here that tells us we got this data from the integration. You're going to see the browser extension indication that we've seen an individual that is logged in through the browser extension. We might have seen a login from Google or a login from Okta or a login from Slack. All these data points are going to help us analyze who's using the application. Now, I might want to look at a case here that there are a lot of users that are here, but who are using Asana that actually did not come back from the application? So if I put a little filter here and said, show me all the users that are accessing Asana, but the source is not Asana. Now I look at all these users that have logged into Asana, but these users are not coming back from the API. I look at this user here, Uri, is accessing Asana. It was captured by the browser extension, but the API is not returning this from Asana. Now, what this tells me is that Uri over here, he's using Asana, but not the integration or the instance of Asana that we have integrated with Torii. Another data point that we may want to look at is the data that came from the expense feed. As I drill into the expense feed, I'm going to be able to see all the expenses that have come into Torii via NetSuite, via Sage, via Oracle Financials, also have integrations with Expensify and Concur. And now what's going to happen is I can look here and there's Uri again. This is what he did. We have an expense report from Uri here that submitted his own version of Asana. Now I look at this and I go, okay, well, we got a contract with Asana and we have an individual now that is submitting an expense report for Asana where we could probably use the seats we may already have or negotiate a better contract if we actually need that type of data. Right? These are all the data points that we are going to need to effectively manage the applications. Now, I also talked in the slide deck about having a distributed process for managing SaaS, having application owners that can manage our SaaS. Now, if I were to look at Torii as saying, what would it look like for an application owner? An application owner can log into Torii. I'm not going to see all the extra details that you probably saw in the last screen where I showed you, where you can see all the details of workflow and configuration. As an app owner, I have access to all my applications. I can drill into my applications. I can see the users that have the particular licenses that they have. I can drill down and visualize the contracts. I can see the users. I can go into this and I can look at all the users that are licensed. As an app owner, I have the ability to run through my actions. I can unassign these licenses. I can unassign the particular license, or I can remove all licenses altogether. Simply running that action, I can go ahead and now as an application owner, I can effectively manage my own SaaS and not have to rely on submitting a ticket for IT to remove this. I can keep my licenses intact to make sure everything is on target. Going back to SaaS management, and we start looking at cost savings. We want to be able to bring in the data points for SaaS. Now, this involves connecting to our financial systems, whether this means NetSuite, whether this is Sage Intacct, Oracle Financials. We're going to be able to pull back your data, and we're going to be able to visualize all the SaaS expenses. Using our NetSuite integration, we may want to limit the specific GLs that have your data. We may only want to bring in journal entries, pull in credit cards, different expense types. We can get extremely granular on how we do this. We can also create individual matching rules to both override the capabilities that we have within the product of how an expense transaction maps to a particular application. We can also ignore specific transactions, all right? All of these are part of effectively managing SaaS. I may want to look at all the SaaS expenditures that I have on a month-to-month basis, visualize the total. Now, another area of looking at SaaS is also, those similar applications. I'm going to put a little filter on here. I'm going to look at the tags, and I'm going to look at all the project management apps that we have. Now, what this is going to do is tell me these are all the project management apps, and what am I spending on all these applications? I look at this, I look at Asana, I see Monday here, I look at what am I spending here, and I think about this and I go, these are two pretty similar applications. One is not nearly as expensive as the other. What's going on here? I may want to go through this. I may want to compare this, a little bit more detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to compare. Let's compare Asana. Let's compare Monday. And let's look at these two apps side by side. Torii has a life cycle status around particular applications. We see that Asana is showing up as a sanctioned app. Monday is not labeled as sanctioned, it's labeled as discovered. I look at the usage of these applications. I see Asana is going on a downward trend. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed on the previous screen when we looked at Asana, we looked at that usage. There were people using that application, but it is going lower. I can see that Monday now is going at a much higher trend. Does IT know about Monday? We like to notify IT that, hey, by the way, we have this new app. Probably here, maybe even well before here, that, hey, we have a new application. But I'm looking at this and I go, I have a lot of money that I'm spending on Asana. I got more people using a cheaper product. Let's look at all the users and let's look at the overlap of these users. I've got users here that have access to both these applications. Let's drill down into the usage. All of these users here have a license for Asana, and they have very little usage of this application, but much higher usage of Monday. Now, this is an area where I may want to dig a little deeper, and this might be an area where I want to just reclaim these licenses. This could be an area where I could save quite a bit of money on this. Now, the other part of managing SaaS and looking at my cost savings is also visualizing this from an organizational perspective. When we start looking at the sales org, what are they spending on SaaS? Looking at software in terms of a cost allocation. This is going to help us streamline and understand what are all the tools that the individual org units are using. We can do various different cost allocations by taking the contract data, taking the license data, taking the actual data that comes from the integration, doing what we call a bottom-up approach to break this down by the individual department cost center, and using this as a cost allocation method so that you can visualize cost savings in a way of saying, okay, now we have a way and we can streamline this. Okay. The next part about SaaS management really comes down to that compelling event, and that is contract renewals. Contracts, when they come up for renewal, there has to be some type of due diligence around contract renewals and understanding, are we going to renew this app, and looking at the usage of these applications to determine whether or not we should be doing this. If I were to look at this calendar of all the contracts I have coming up for renewal over the next couple of years, I may want to drill down into an application, visualize all the contracts that I have in here. Now, by looking at this, and I may want to drill down into a specific contract, we're going to be able to have multiple contracts assigned to particular applications, understand the currency of this application. But now we get into the important elements. What is the start date? What is the end date? of these applications. Understand what the contract value of this is. Now, when we start looking at things, we may want to understand and put in a specific workflow. What if 6 months prior to the contract renewal, we send out a notification that goes out to the contract owner? And what that does is ask them a couple questions. Hey, are we planning on renewing this contract? Yes or no? Now, maybe if they say no, we then flag within the product that this now has a status of do not renew. When we see that, maybe we have another workflow that fires 30 days prior and says, this contract is now flagged as do not renew. We need to notify the IT owner, the budget owner, the contract owner, all the various different stakeholders to say, we're not renewing this contract. It's coming up for renewal in 30 days. We need to make sure that we follow and execute the opt-out. Right? By having these alerts and notifications, this is what's going to help us keep on top of SaaS management. And that's going to take us to the next stage, which is the workflows. Now, as we get into Torii workflows work based on specific trigger points. We have user triggers, we have license triggers, application triggers, and contract triggers. Now, a user trigger would basically be looking at data that came from your identity provider or your HRMS solution, and we may want to follow some type of onboarding, offboarding flow. An application trigger would be looking at data points and say, hey, we've discovered a new application and the source is not your identity provider. By seeing this is now an indication that we may want to notify IT that a new application is being used within your organization and it's not integrated with your identity provider. Or you've discovered a new application that has come from expenses that is not integrated with your identity provider. These workflows could be sending out notifications to your IT teams, potentially via Teams or Slack, right? Obviously, then we want to get into license triggers, right? These are the things that we want to act on. When we start looking at license triggers, we may want to, as we said an example earlier, is what if at 30 days of inactivity? Now, the key part of inactivity is we want to look at a specific license. We don't really necessarily care if somebody's been inactive on a Power BI free license, but we care if somebody's been inactive on an E5 license. Right? Now, if somebody's been inactive on an E5 license for 30 days, what do we want to do? We probably don't want to remove that license. It's only been 30 days, right? Maybe we just want to send them a note to say, hey, by the way, are you still using your E5 license? This is costing us X number of dollars a year. Maybe we do this again at 60 days. Maybe we do it again at 90 days. Or maybe perhaps at 90 days, what we're going to do is we're going to send out maybe an approval notice, right? This could go to the end user. This could go to the manager. Maybe we want to say something like, do you approve the removal of your Office 365 E5 license? All right. And then we can use a variety of different personalization tokens that is going to pull back the data points from our integration. Right. Now, when this happens, the end user will get a notification that says, yes, I approve the removal of my license, or no, I don't approve the removal of my license. Right. We may want to then, if it's approved, then actually go into where we go into Office 365 and we do the unassigned the particular license. Right. That is a common action in which we do. We may want to, potentially create a ticket in a ticketing system, right? Using our Jira Cloud integration, we may want to create a ticket for a particular team to go ahead and perform some type of renewal. We may want to have this removal go through the identity provider by removing the user from a particular group within the identity provider that's going to force the deprovisioning. Torii's automated workflow can go from sending notifications, sending Slack notifications, removing the license directly with the product, removing you or adding you from a group. There's a variety of different actions that we can do. There's not a lot of time today to actually go through all the different possibilities of the Torii workflow. I'm going to highly recommend that we set up a one-on-one demo where we can go through a little bit deeper and walk through the individual parts of the platform. The key part of doing this is ultimately getting things integrated within the platform. Now, to get things integrated within the platform, the first element of this would be to connect your identity providers. As we go through and we connect your Azure AD, your Okta, your OneLogin, this is going to pull in those key data points that we're going to get into the platform to understand not just the apps that are being used, but start looking at the audit data. Are people actually using these applications? This is going to be the starting point. As we then start to pull in data from your HRMS solution, then start to pull in data from your financial systems. Right? This will now start to build back, and you can start to realize some of these cost savings. The expense data feed is a key element of discovery. Doing continuous discovery is critical so that we're always on top of all the applications that are being used. Therefore, being able to visualize the licenses, be able to visualize cost savings, be able to then tie this into that whole contract renewal. We start to then look at this, and then we want to start to pull in as many of these applications as possible, right? Torii has 170 plus integrations. Most of our integrations are pulling the full suite of data from licenses to last login day to usage. And we also allow you as well to create your own custom integrations as well using Torii's API. Using the custom integration API, this will allow you to then bring your own data into the platform. And this is a key element so that you really have one place where you can visualize your cost savings, you can visualize your licenses, you can understand where your contracts are coming for, and then really tie everything together. And then you can start to realize that continuous cost savings that Torii is providing within the platform. Okay. So Tracy, it's about it for right now for the demo. Do we have any questions that are in the chat?
We do have some questions, Steve. The first one is, how do I limit my procurement team from only seeing contract and expense data?
Okay. Torii has a wide variety of roles within the platform. We have roles that are designed for procurement, roles that are designed for app owners, IT roles. You can get granular in how you design the roles to ensure that only the right people are seeing the data that they need to see, and have that specifically where they can have their own login. You can have this obviously configured. We recommend you configure this with your identity provider, and then you'll be able to visualize and contain the information and ensure they have the data that they need so that we can obviously have that distributed level of SaaS management where we can really accelerate cost savings within the platform.
Okay, great. Next question. We have private information in our NetSuite environment. How do we prevent that information from going to Torii?
Okay. Anytime we connect with one of your financial systems, right? We recommend we obviously scope down the integration in the sense that let's understand where SaaS is being spent within your organization. Let's understand the GL accounts that are being used. So now what we can do is when we reach out to your NetSuite environment is to limit it to the GL accounts where, payroll and all the sensitive information are not it, right? Limit it to where SaaS can live. Now, quite often when we do these integrations, there is SaaS that are outside of where we typically think they are. But this is a configuration that we can easily have done and limit that data to ensure that any private or sensitive information like payroll is not coming into Torii. And that's one thing you can be sure of, that, we only want the information that is needed, that can effectively manage and is relevant to SaaS.
Great. Next question. We need to see users in Tories from applications that you don't have connectors. How do we do that?
Okay. So there are a couple different options that we have within the platform. Now, one option at the end, I mentioned that we do have a custom integration API. Now, whether or not you are sophisticated where you have a workforce automation tool like a Workato, a Tray, or a Zapier that can use our API to pull data into the platform, because we don't necessarily have an out-of-the-box integration. We have examples of using a Google Sheet to sync information. But within the product, you do have an ability to go to any application, hit the little plus sign in the top right, and then you can import a CSV. So then you can now track users for applications that we may not have integrations for. They could just be your own custom applications that you want to track users for. So you got a variety of different ways to get that data into the platform.
Great. Here's another one. Can Torii create tickets in other ITSM tools such as Zendesk, Asana, and Freshdesk?
Absolutely. Torii has a number of out-of-the-box integrations to create tickets in all those popular ITSM tools. We also have, and I didn't get a chance to show it in today's demo, but we also have a custom action within our workflow engine that allows us to call an external REST API for other ticketing systems that we may not have that integration for. That would allow you to easily use our custom action to create tickets in other APIs. But we have the Zendesk, we have Asana, we have Freshdesk. All those are part of the product.
All right, another one. I see Torii uses a browser extension for application and user discovery. How are you ensuring employee privacy with this feature?
Okay. Now, the browser extension serves two purposes. One is obviously tracking usage, and that's going to help augment the data source from all the different points that are coming in so that we can accurately say, yeah, people are using the application. The other part is discovery. Now, when it comes down to discovery, Torii is looking for, when you log into a SaaS application, now a business SaaS application, using your corporate email address. So by combination of the corporate email address and the application being labeled in Torii as a business app, that's what's going to be flagged and sent to Torii from the browser. Now, what that means is we're not going to see logins with personal email addresses, and we're not going to see logins into consumer level accounts like DoorDash, like Uber, Tinder, et cetera. We're not going to see that type of data. That's not going to come into Torii, right? What we're going to be looking for are the business apps that have been logged in with your corporate email address.
Great. It looks like we have time for just one more question. Does Torii support benchmarking?
Absolutely. In the licenses page, as you enter your license cost data, Torii will give you that benchmark notification of where do you stand, right? Are you in line with what you should be paying? Are you below it? Are you above it? This is something that is part of the product. You can get to that on the licenses page.
Great. Thank you, Steve. That's all the time we have for today. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, we'll be sure to follow up after the call. Thank you and have a great day.